my loves, my name is Paige, this is Pages with Paige, and today we're going to be doing my October wrap up. Very stressful day at work, so this is going to be a rapid fire wrap up, hopefully. I'm very happy to have participated in NetGalley November, so that definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone trying to read those ARCs as well as Camp Crystal Lake Readathon, and I'm so glad that I could make them work and fit prompts for both. So I ended up reading 16 books, which equated to a total of 5,157 pages. This breaks down to 166 pages per day and on average 322 pages per book. My average rating was a 4.19, and in terms of genres, I read 1 anthology, 1 contemporary, 8 fantasy, 2 horror, 1 humor, 1 paranormal, 1 sci-fi, and 1 thriller. So a very diverse range when I wasn't reading fantasy. In terms of formats, I read 4 ebooks, 1 physical book, 3 ebook audiobook combinations, and 8 physical audiobook combos as well. In terms of age range, I read 10 adult, 1 new adult, 3 YA, and 2 middle grade. In terms of rating, I had 1 5-star, 5 4.5, 9 4-stars, and 1 3.5. In terms of standalones, I read 8. In terms of series, I started 2 and have decided to DNF 1 of those. I continued on with 3, and I'm up to date with 3, which is kind of funny, and I'll explain why as we get into the books. My biggest book was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which comes in to the page count total of being 1,006 pages, and my smallest was Into the Riverlands, which came in at 112. My listening hours was 35.95, which was quite low for me, mostly because I was reading ebooks that didn't have audio books, and 10 hours of this was dedicated purely to Jonathan Strange. For publications, I had 1 from 1980, I had 1 from 1988, 1 from 1999, 1 from between 2011 to 2015, I can't actually remember what year it was, 6 between 2016 and 2020, and 5 2022 releases. So feeling good about that. Those are my statistics, and let's dive into the books. So the first book I read was The Truth About Everything by Bridget Farr, and I gave this 4 stars. I really found this a fascinating look at doomsday mindsets and the lengths in which families will go to keeping their children out of the loop. I think that it approached the topic very interestingly, and whilst the discussion was not completely nuanced, I don't feel like any book under 300 pages is capable of dealing with such a diverse range of ideologies and beliefs, as well as coming into understanding yourself. I found it really interesting the way that Bridget chose to go about it. Then I read Times Convert by Deborah Harkness, and I gave this 4 stars. I did not enjoy this as much as the All Souls trilogy, and mostly because Phoebe's perspective annoyed the crap out of me. I fully understand why. It was a rebirth, and so it is going through the same stages that children go through and teenagers go through, but in singular days rather than years. I found that whenever I was in her perspective and she was acting like a teenage brat, it was just so uncomfortable. And then we would jump back to the protagonist from the All Souls trilogy, and it would be like, ah, so nice. And then we'd have to go back to her perspective, and I would just be so disappointed and pulled out of the story. I still really enjoyed it because I love this world, I love these characters, and I love the discussions that Deborah Harkness chooses to have, and I appreciate seeing the vampire rebirth, but also, holy shit. So that's why I gave it a 4 rather than a 5, and definitely, I think if you're a fan of the series, just go in knowing that it's not following, but they still are quite active, and it's nice to see where their family go, but it is going through birth to teenage years with a vampire, and I wanted to slap her. Hello.
Hi.
How goes it?
Good, thanks. I just thought I'd call you as I haven't actually talked to you in a while.
Hi.
Yeah, hello.
The next book that I read was Solutions and Other Problems by Ali Brush, and I gave this 4 stars. I read their first collection, Hyperbole and a Half, and really enjoyed it. I was laughing out loud the entire time, and this one had a lot more serious content matter. Some of the funnier stories didn't hit as funny as the originals. The first one of her getting stuck in a bucket absolutely had me in hysterics, and I appreciate the discussion of really difficult topic matter but shown through a lens of growth. So overall, I had fun. Just some of them were a little bit more concerning, but still a whole lot of fun, and the facial expressions are just brilliant. Next up, I read Off Season by Jack Ketchum, and this was for Gavin's selection for my Advent Challenge, and I gave this 3.5. I can't say I enjoyed this, but I was intrigued by it. It was very short, very quick to get through, and there's a lot that goes down. This is the first in the series that I'm not going to read the rest in them, like, unless someone specifically puts it on my friend chooses for future years. I don't really have any intention of picking the rest of these up. I think it was interesting and unnerving, but I didn't really find it scary. I didn't find it to be like, it was gory, but it was more of a caricature of gore. I can definitely understand why it was as prolific as it was when it first came out, but for me personally, I think I'm just a little bit too desensitized, which is weird and not a sentence I ever thought I would say in regards to the horror genre. Also, listening to the audiobooks on 3 times speed definitely help with not lingering in the grossness for a long period of time, so it makes it easier to get through as well. Like I said, it was part of my Advent Challenge, so we need to mark off the cool go button, and that one's just down here. So there we go. Then I had my yearly reread of Matilda by Roald Dahl and gave this 5 stars. I absolutely adore this, and obviously with it being one of my favorite books of all time, I just had so much fun listening to Kate Winslet narrate the audiobook and follow along. It was so good, and I didn't realize, but this will count for the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge of an adaptation, since the movie is coming out soon based off the musical. I had a lot of fun just diving back into the story and feeling the love and joy that I always feel. Then I read A Mirror Mended by Alex E. Harrow and gave this 4.5 stars. I love the Fractured Fable series and keen for future installments. I liked that this was a take on the Snow White story and the conversations that the protagonists are not always what they seem, and that characters can be very nuanced. Considering how short these are, I just really like diving into the different worlds. The first one was based off Sleeping Beauty. This was had a Sleeping Beauty character but focusing more on Snow White's story, and I found it really interesting how they played through that dynamic. Next up, I read The Behemoth, that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, and I gave this 4 stars. There were definitely elements to this that did not need to be included because it could have done without, but I did appreciate the story as a whole. It was so interesting, and the magic in this was really engaging. I found that with Piranesi, I was very confused with the magic system, whereas this made a lot more sense to me, and I really enjoyed getting to see this spiral of the characters, because I always love when characters go off the rails. So I do think it could be shortened down significantly, probably to about the 800-page mark, but I do feel like my investment in the characters was strong because it did take so much time to develop the world. I just felt like the plot meandered so much, and we could have just done it a little bit faster so it wasn't this. If you like magic in a historical setting, I definitely would suggest checking this out. Ow, I just dropped it on my thumb. So that stack took me a large percentage of the month to be able to get through, and I was trying to tick off as many NetGalley November prompts as possible, as well as Camp Crystal Lake prompts. So instead of just reading one book that would have counted towards ARCtober, I decided to read 2 books that would then lead me to an arc. So the first of those being The Empress of Salt and Sorrow by Neve Vo. This is the first in the Singing Hills cycle series, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I think that it is exceptionally well written, and just I got swept away in the magic of it, and the setting of it is just so interesting, and whilst it is so short, I feel that it really packs a punch in the topics that it chooses to explore. And then I decided to read When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, which is the second book in the series, because I needed a buzzword with a creature or animal in the title. So tiger counted for that, and again gave it 4 stars. I felt that I didn't enjoy this one as much, but still also loved it. I think just the narrative with the tigers was a very interesting perspective, and it sort of just built on the world that little bit more. And then I took a break from the Singing Hills cycle series and read The Goddess and the Woodsman by Coraline Moss, and I gave this 4 stars. I don't know what I was expecting going into this. It was a blend of modern world with mythology, and I really enjoyed that. It does make the presumption that you will have a good knowledge of mythology, only because it doesn't really explain in depth the mythology based. They just talk a lot about a lot of different gods and goddesses and sort of magical beings and creatures, and so you just gotta go with it. But being somewhat versed in mythology, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I could see where they were going and really enjoyed the different dynamics and the different characters that came into play. I really felt for the characters and the events that had happened. Also, the steamy scenes in this were very nice, which was a surprise because I was not expecting any steam, and it was a little bit steamy. Then I read Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare and gave this 4 stars. I realized how much I enjoy this in comparison to the Model Instrument series. I feel like the plot's very predictable in where we're going to go, but I'm still invested in these characters now, and I feel like they're really not as annoying. Will is angsty as all fuck, but it's not in the same way that Jace was, so it's a lot more palatable. I had a good time with it. It was fun, it was quick, and my attention was held, and I can really feel myself starting to get on board with these characters a lot more. Then I came back to the Singing Hills cycle and read Into the Riverlands, which is the 3rd installment, and gave this 4.5 stars as well, and also got me caught up with this series. So I started, continued, and is now up to date, so they count 1 from every spot for my series. I really love the action in it, and I feel like the stories that get told were really, really engaging, and I really liked the twists and turns with these characters, and I really like the setting of this. They are traveling through the marshlands, and so there's a lot of shit that's going down, and I like that it didn't shy away from some harder discussions. Then I read The Girl in Red by Christina Henry and gave this 4.5. This was our group book for Camp Crystal Lake, Team Elm Street, and I had so much fun with this. I thought there was disability in it, but I couldn't remember, and our protagonist has a prosthetic leg. This is also dystopian set after a pandemic, so I apologize profusely to those that read it and were not prepared for a pandemic book. I really should have realized when it said sent those who were fleeing into quarantine camps, but I didn't make those connections because I don't read the backs of books in detail, and so I went in and got a nice shock. I really liked the split timeline as we go for when our characters are first introduced to the cough. Fuck! Is this written in 2020? No, I feel like it's earlier. June of 2019. Ah, excellent. So that's fun. Christina Henry really has a way of unnerving us. She's dealing with the past and the attitudes towards someone with a disability, as well as in the future, and trying to actually survive in this post-apocalyptic styled world. And it was very interesting, and I definitely enjoyed it. I really loved Red as a character, and the fact that they were not afraid to stand up for themselves. Again, if you haven't read Christina Henry before, Alice is definitely darker than this, but this still has a significant number of dark themes addressed throughout. It is the bingo board just there, so that will give me 2 bingos. So there we go. Yay! I'm so excited. Look at it. There. Oh, there. So many. Next up, I read Into the Forest, which was edited by Lindy Ryan and had a collection of stories all based off Baba Yaga, and I gave it 4 stars. I really, really enjoy Baba Yaga's tale. I was, I think, first introduced to it in the House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson, and I find the way that fairy tales evolve and adapt and are seen through so many different lenses with so many different experiences and voices to contribute to it was just fascinating. And whilst some were not my favorite, I definitely found that overall this was an enjoyable collection of Baba Yaga stories, and they don't shy away from Baba Yaga's dark side for some of the stories. I just loved that it was a whole different slew of voices, but all still discussing the Baba Yaga entity and figuring out their different portrayals. Then I had a little bit of time left at the end of the month and I was like, you know, I could read smart things, but instead I'm gonna read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. So this was for my Advent challenge as well, and I gave this 4 stars. I found it very engaging, very quick to get through. I definitely can understand why it took BookTube by storm when it was first released, and it was very creepy. I didn't see most of the twists coming, but there were some that I was like, oh yeah, I saw you. Also, currently I work in a psychology practice, and yeah, no, this is completely not feasible. It was just like, I took myself out of the story because I was like, there is no, you would not have been able to get away with it. Okay, but that's just my life experience instead. On the Advent board, just here. So here we go. And there we go. I got so many. Yay! So I got now those. Ah! So exciting! I'm almost there. Oh my god, this is so exciting. I literally have 4 left. Oh, so cool. And then finally, I again just wanted something short and sweet, so I decided to read The Proposal by K.A. Applegate, which is the 35th book in the Animorph series. I gave it 4 stars. Marco and his family dynamics are just hitting hard in these later editions, and it hurts me deeply, but I love it. Again, I feel like some of the behaviors were a little bit out of character for some of the characters, but they are growing and learning, so I need to acknowledge, like, this is venturing very much more into YA than middle grade now for me personally, and I think that's very interesting to discuss the difference as they are dealing with being in a war and having to fight these creatures and deal with such hard topic matter and not be able to actually talk to a professional or their parents. So 4 stars for that, and I feel like I'm a little bit more reinvigorated with the Animorph series and happy to continue on. So this plus quite a few ebooks were the books that I read in the month of October. Let me know in the comments how your October went, what was your favourite book of October, and if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you on my next video. Bye!